שלום לכולם, אנחנו בעוד רעיון במסגרת הפרויקט לחקר יהודי איראן במרכז אליאנס ללימודים איראניים. היום יש לנו אורחת מאוד מכובדת, אורחת מעבר לים. הסיבה שאנחנו הפעם פונים לרעיון מעבר לים זה כדי להראות עוד היבט בחיים של יהודי איראן, שבמהלך המאה ה-20 בעצם סוגיית ההגירה ומעבר מאיראן לארצות אחרות היו חלק בלתי נפרד מהקורות של היהודים, של הקהילות השונות באיראן בתקופה הזאת. אני תכף אגיד שלום לאורחת המכובדת שלנו, נראה כמה תמונות מהחיים של האורחת באיראן ואחר כך גם מחוץ לאיראן, סיפור חיים מאוד מאוד מעניין ומרתק, נשמע את זה דרך התמונות, שוב מתוך מטרה גם לספר את הסיפור החיים הייחודי הזה וגם כדי להאיר, לשלוח אור על היבטים שונים בחיי הקהילה היהודית באיראן במהלך המאה ה-20. אז נגיד שלום, hello Fereshteh.
Hello Miriam.
Thank you for joining us. I will give you the stage and to introduce yourself, and then we go on to the pictures, to the photographs, and we will be hearing you telling your story, your life story through these photographs. So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Miriam. I'm really honored that you have selected me for this interview. So I hope that I can at least make a presentation that will be interesting for the people who will in the future try and listen to my story and they find it interesting. But maybe to me it was interesting, but I hope that your audience will also enjoy it.
I'm sure it's really ordinary and unique story.
Thank you very much. My name is Fereshteh Victory, and my married name is Shokati. So I call myself Fereshteh Victory most of the time because that's how I'm known. And I was born in Iran in 1944, October of 1944. As far back as I can remember, I had a very wonderful childhood in Iran, you know, and I had 3 older brothers and who were a little bit older than I was, and so they adored me and they spoiled me. And then, but gradually, as I was like 4 years old, my oldest brother, it was after the war, and he and some cousins, they traveled to the US to pursue his studies. And then I visited once back in 1950 with my parents. My father had a lot of medical issues, you know, so we traveled to Europe and America for him to have surgeries. And then after our return, which brings us to the first photograph that you have there, those are my other 2 brothers. So they gradually
photograph
in the
let's start with that.
That's me, my parents, and my 2 other brothers. My oldest one was already in America, so the other 2, they also, my father decided that they should go to the States and pursue their studies. So they left one after the other. And this is, I think if I remember, this is the last picture that we had taken with each other. So, but
sorry to interrupt, do you remember the year? I mean, how old are you in this photograph?
In this photograph, I believe I'm probably 12. I would say that I'm 12 years old in this photograph. And And then the following pictures, we go back to my childhood when I was very, very young. This was just to show our lives in Iran, that how wonderful it was. During the winter, we used to go skiing. Uh, the one is with my mother and a couple of other cousins, and we used to go skiing. But even if we didn't ski, you know, they would dress up with the fur coats, and so, but we would go to the mountains where people would ski, or we would have family picnics. In the other picture, it's a family picnic again with cousins and uncles. On Fridays, we used to go to the outskirts of Tehran and have picnics there, and it was most enjoyable. So even now with all my cousins, they're grown my age, and you know, some are here in America, and we manage to see each other still. And so these are just to show my childhood that was very happy, and we enjoyed the winter and the summer. And then the next picture, I believe, is
just a minute first. I just want to, since the purpose of this interview is also to know something about, more generally, about the lives of Jews in Iran. Do you remember, I mean, where did you
I remember that, you know, from the very beginning, even at that young age, when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I had just started going to school, you know, I went to there were just a couple of specifically Jewish schools. I know that my brothers went during the first 6 years of their studies. They went to Jewish schools and they studied Hebrew and what have you. But then eventually, when they came to high school, they went to a general school, you know, a high school. There were so many. But I remember, even as a young child, I never felt any difference, you know, between going to a Jewish school or a Muslim school, because my parents developed in us that feeling that, you know, there is no religion. It's just one country, and you're Iranian and you're Persian under the same umbrella as everybody else. And in fact, my father, he insisted that I go to my religious study classes when I was in high school, that I studied the Quran. And because he had studied the Quran while he was in school, or in Alliance Française when they went to school. So we never felt any difference. And I'm Jewish, you're Muslim. I mean, we had the high holidays. My friends were familiar with it. And of course, all the other, you know, Islamic holidays, we observed them too. And so there was never this feeling of that, you know, I'm a stranger in a strange country. You know, we just loved our language and loved our music and loved our classmates and our interactions and celebrating birthdays together. And as we grew older, we became teenagers. You know, we used to have parties, and as one picture shows, it was all girls. You know, we would get together and have a party. But
yeah, this is, yeah.
Well, that one is summers in the Caspian Sea. We used to go to the beach again with these are my parents' best friends and the children. You know, we used to go to the Caspian for the summer. So I have such fond memories of our summer days by the Caspian.
Do you remember if it's from Bandar Pahlavi or?
Yes, exactly. This picture is in Bandar Pahlavi. In those days, Bandar Pahlavi was the place to go. And
the name was changed after the revolution, but yeah. But,
yes, it changed. But in those days, we used to go to Bandar Pahlavi, and we loved it. You know, that there was the sea and the eating and the swimming and the playing, and just such beautiful, you know, fond memories of the summers. In fact, as I was going through these pictures, I sent them to all these little kids in the photographs. They happened to be in Los Angeles, so I sent it to them. I said, "Remember this picture?" And everybody was so excited.
Which I'm not sure I recognize you between the girls here. Where are you in the picture?
Well, I'm the one with the hat on. I don't know how to show it to you.
Oh, with the sunglasses?
With the short, but the short white, the short, yeah, okay, you're getting close, a little bit to
this
the
one?
left.
This.
Yeah,
this
that one, that girl is me, all white and with a hat on.
And this is your father?
No, that is my father. Maybe he's the one taking the picture. He's the father of my father's friend. You know, we also happen to be neighbors in the same street, and you know the balconies facing each other, and so. But my mother is also there, not the one next to me, but the one next to her is my mother. Yeah, that's my mother. But the other lady is the mother of the other kids.
Yeah.
So they have passed away, unfortunately, but the kids, we are still around and we keep in touch after all these years. Yeah. And,
oh, really? Yeah.
So this brings back fond memories of the Caspian. So, and then I believe it's the next picture. Yeah, as we grew older, this is our high school days, and we used to have parties. Boys were not allowed, of course, at that time, but we used to get together and have music, and if it was a birthday, have cake, and every week we would gather at another girl's family. So I am in touch with 2-3 of them still in that photographs, and the rest are just scattered in Los Angeles or still in Iran.
Can you just tell us what was the name of the school, or some memories of the school, of the...
Yes, I remember the name of my first grade, second through the 6th grade was Firuz Kui. I went to Firuz Kui, Dabestan Firuz Kui. Excuse me.
Yeah, sure.
And then when we went to the high school, the high school was Hadaf, which was one of the famous high schools in Tehran. It was Hadaf. And the last 2 years of my high school, I switched to, it was called Homayun High School, which was a more private high school. And the friends that I have from my high school years in Hadaf and then Homayun are the ones that up to today, we are still in contact. Unfortunately, we are scattered again in Iran and in Los Angeles and here and Washington, DC, and about 2-3 of my classmates in high school, unfortunately, have passed away because of various illnesses, which really hit us, the rest of us, very, very hard. Because even after high school back in 1963, when my parents, especially my father, decided to emigrate to America, because my 3 brothers had already finished their university and they were established at work in the States, and they were not coming back to Iran. Only one of them came back to Iran and got married and to an Iranian lady who had gone to school in Cambridge, England. So they met, they got married, and they left for the States. And then my father told my mother and I that, well, what are we going to do here all alone? And, we should also immigrate to America. And he had this just fabulous dream about moving to America. And no matter how much I cried and pleaded, and my mother cried, and we pleaded that we didn't want to leave. We didn't want to leave our home and our house and our friends. I was so much attached to my friends, but my father said, no, we are moving, we have to go. And so it was the end of my high school. And so at least he waited until I finished the last day of high school and finished my exam. And then we got it on a plane and came to America. And of course, all my friends, they all went abroad. They went to England, to Switzerland, to France, to also go to school. But they mostly returned after school to Iran. But I was the only one who stayed in America. But as it happened, my mother realized, yes.
Sorry, Fereshteh. I just, in this picture, I mean, your friends were not only Jews, yeah? Am I right?
No, they were mixed. We were all mixed. Yes, no, we were, we had Jewish friends, we had Muslim friends, we had the Baha'i friend, we have Christian friends. It was just all mixed, the same way in school, everything was mixed classes, even religious classes, I studied everything, but the only thing I didn't study was Hebrew because my brothers had, but I didn't because they didn't teach that in our schools. For that, I would have to go to a Jewish school, but I didn't. But my father said there's no difference. You have to study all religion. You have to study if you happen to be in a school where they teach you the Quran or the Sharia or whatever. You have to go in the class, sit down and listen and learn because it's religion is religion. You live in this country and you have to know. So no, there was absolutely no, they knew when our holidays were, and I knew when, obviously, the other holiday. Ours were happy holidays, mostly. We only had Yom Kippur that was sort of unhappy, and we had to fast and go to the synagogue, and but even there it was just to mingle with our friends and talk. And at that time, at that age, we would sit in the back and talk to the boys and and get grief from our parents. Why did you talk to that boy? So that continued, with our parents through high school. But then when we even moved to America, my mother realized that how much I was still attached to Iran, and I never made friends in America. It was, in those days, the early 60s, there were very limited number of Iranians in New York where we settled. And so I never, there weren't too many people my age. I had cousins, but they didn't speak Farsi and my English wasn't that good. And so even though I started 1 year to go to university, I went to New York University to study English. And then I wanted to go away at least to college, to Boston or Washington or something, and be away so that I could immerse myself into the American life and language and school. But my parents didn't allow it. They were still old-fashioned, I suppose, or they didn't want to part with me. So, but then my mother realized how much I was then attached to my friends and my Iranian roots. So every year or every other year, my mother and I would travel either to Europe, to England, to Switzerland, or to Iran for me to see my old friends. So this is how we all kept in touch. My mother insisted on it, And then, of course, we would go to Iran very often. to visit the family. And I would always make a point of going to our old street and look at Khiyabun Kach, that's where our house was, and just stand around and look at our house and wondering who lives there now and who sleeps in my room up in the balcony, you know. So my love of Iran, even now after all these years that I'm almost an old woman, hasn't ended. You know, it's just unfortunate that I haven't been able to go back since the revolution. So, but as it turned out, I never finished college here because I was very unhappy. I couldn't, deal with the pressure, and I couldn't deal with not having any friends, and I didn't get along with Americans. It was just completely different. I was always a foreigner. You know, the funny thing is, Miriam, until I came to America, some people may hate me for this, but until I came to America in 1963 and then years after, that I didn't realize that, well, they distinguish, you're Jewish and we are Christians, or if they would ask me, where are you from? I would say, I'm from Iran, or I'm from Persia, or whatever they understood at that time in the 60s. And when you would ask an American, what are you? Where are you from?
Fereshteh, there was some kind of a, you are on mute. We can't hear you, sorry. We can't hear you, Fereshteh. You are on mute. And let me just, maybe I can unmute you. Just a minute. Just a minute. Now you should unmute yourself. I cannot.
Okay, because I didn't touch anything. It just appeared right now.
Yeah, it was disconnected and I lost you for just few seconds.
Okay.
Okay.
So I was just saying that, here, if I would ask someone, where are you from? They would say, I'm Jewish. I would say, I didn't ask you what your religion is. I asked you, where are you from? This was how they would respond. They would never, because with me, I distinguished between my nationality and my religion. This is how we did it back home. But here, the nationality didn't matter. It seemed like religion was more important. I'm Christian, I'm this, I'm that. And I would have to go back and know, what country are you from? And then, somebody would answer me, okay, I'm from here, I'm from there, I'm from there. So I couldn't really, deal with that. So I never had any really very, very close friends. So eventually at the end of, it was a year before my last year in college, in New York, the commute got to me, the subway got to me, and not having friends got to me, and not being allowed to go to the library or to have friends or classmates to help me. My parents stayed a little bit old-fashioned that way. Oh no, don't stay in school late at night. I don't want you to take the subway. I said, well, you should have let me go to a boarding school, And my brothers, who had been here for ages, since during the war, they encouraged my parents. They never said anything, with the exception of one, that no, you have to let her free. You have to let her, this is America. She has to, go out and learn the language, have friends. And my parents said, well, we don't know, well, you know better this country. And So anyway, my college years were horrible, and then gradually I found some Iranian friends, as you can see in the other picture, so
Let
I
me share
found one
again
or
the
two.
pictures. I have a maybe personal question, two personal questions.
Sure.
One, what, if you remember or know, what motivated your parents to leave Iran? Because really, we see it through the pictures and the way you tell the story, you had a good life in Iran. What
Yes.
motivated? Yeah.
I think I partly mentioned that my father had traveled to America and to Europe a lot since because he had an illness that he had to go to France or to America for treatment, and he just liked the curve, the life there. And also, because my brothers had decided to stay in America and not come back, my father sort of decided that, okay, the whole family should be together. And since he was not very active business-wise because of his health, so it didn't matter. We could move to America. And the fact that I didn't want to go and my mother didn't want to leave her family and what have you, it didn't matter. Also, but I don't want to get very political about it, but this was back in 1963, which was the beginning of the sort of a Islamic upheaval suddenly at that year. And that's the first time that everybody heard the Ayatollah Khomeini's name, at that time. And so there were curfews and there were, I remember the fear, that was going everywhere. Everybody, especially the Jewish community, they started, being afraid of what was happening. But at the same time, we knew that the Shah would protect the Iranian Jews because he was always pro Jewish communities in Iran and what have you. But then my father, between that situation and the situation with my brother and his health and etc., he made the supreme decision that we should move to America. And so in those days you would just get a visa and a plane ticket and come, and then once you got here, then you would apply for green card and through my brothers or what have you. And so that's what prompted us to come to America. And then my mother and I, we had to get used to it. But then the funny thing was that several years later, my father realized that we have a saying in Persian, ke halva pakhsh nemikonan, meaning, they're not giving away
some
cookies, cookies in America. And then he would mention, well, what if we go back to Iran? And my mother said, oh no, you're not uprooting me a second time. This time we are staying here. I'm not uprooting, Fereshteh, and I'm not uprooting, our house and home, and my brothers are gone and married and working and this and that. And so it was just the three of us. Even though we lived in this very huge Tudor fancy house in New York and all of that, my mother said, no, I'm not moving. I'm not moving. She was very adamant about it. And for me, because we were going back and forth, so I was happy about that. And so what happened was that eventually I left college and started working. So I had different, works at different bookstore or here or there until I hit the jackpot and I got employed in a very famous language school called Berlitz. I'm pretty sure that there was one in Israel back in the 60s. Yeah, it was an international language center where they would teach all the live languages. And
we have it still, I think the Belarus.
Yeah, still the Berlitz School of Languages exists. Yeah, so so I started working there. I started as a receptionist first, and then eventually, as we got into the late 60s and very early 70s, suddenly there was a rush of lots of businesses and work in Iran. And there was really like an exodus of Americans going to Iran with different companies, starting with banks and what have you. And so suddenly when they realized I was Iranian, they said, oh, okay, we want to get you off the reception desk and we want to train you, because suddenly we have a rush of people and companies who want to study Farsi before going to Iran. So we need to train you into the Berlitz method and for you to teach Farsi. Just because you speak Farsi doesn't mean you can teach it. So they had to, to train me. So they trained me into the method of Berlitz, and then suddenly I found myself in classes, private classes of big banks. You know, the head of the bank, so-and-so bank wants to go to Iran, so he wants to study Farsi. So I would go to class and teach him, 3 times a week. And then there was, the Shah was buying all the F-14s from Grumman. So the pilots had to go to Iran and teach the Iranian pilots. So then I suddenly had to teach all these pilots, Farsi, so that when they go to Iran, I mean, God bless them, they wanted to get familiarized with where they were going, because in those days, I truly had to bring the map of the world and put it on the desk before I started teaching Farsi, to tell them where Iran was located on the map. And, this is what I had to do. And then eventually I realized, I said, well, okay, now this is not enough. Is your wife going with you? Yes, my wife is going also. What is she going to do in Tehran or whatever, in Abadan or wherever you're going, while you're working, in offices? What is she going? I have no idea. She has to just get adjusted. So it gave me an idea that why don't we have cultural orientation classes for the American wives who are also going to Iran? So I approached the head of Berlitz schools, the company, the mother company. I approached them. I said, it's fine that we are teaching Farsi. And then in return, I also had to train other teachers. So I recruited some other Iranian ladies to learn, because more and more we needed teachers. So once I approached, they said, that's a fantastic idea. Why don't you come up with a program for us, so that, we approach the companies and tell them to send the wives also. And so that's what we did, and that's what happened. We made programs for the wives. Okay, this is some quick language lessons for you, and this is where you go to shop, and this is where you go to buy food, and this is where you to buy dresses. These are the historical places you have to go. These are the museums you can visit while you're there. And, so we gave them a cultural orientation, classes. So this way I became very, gung-ho about this, and everybody loved my ideas, and we wrote books, and we to pass along, And then again, then suddenly somebody came and approached me from the higher ups in the school that, I think that you and I should part with Berlitz and make our own company, because Berlitz now has enough, teachers and whatever. We should have our own company, our own little school, and do the same thing that we are doing here, but we should offer it in Iran. Tell them, okay, now you start here with us, but when you get to Iran, you can continue once you get there. We can still manage for English, for Farsi classes for you. We can manage the little travels around for the wives. We can manage someone to take them to museums, to take them shopping. And this, so this became just an idea. Oh my God, this is getting bigger and bigger by the day. And so this is now into the 70s, early 70s. And the rush was becoming bigger and bigger to Iran. And so we decided, my partner and I, it would require a trip to Tehran to see how we can set this up. So we got on a plane and went to Tehran. And of course, this was all against my parents and my brothers.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask. How
they took a very, very dim view of this. They were not happy with me, getting big and big. My mother has had fantasies about me getting married and having children, and it was the farthest thing from my mind. And my brothers wanted to put me in a bottle and put me on a shelf, and it was just chaos at our household. But I was adamant. I said, you forced me to leave Iran to come here. You forced me to go to the university I didn't want to go. You forced me to do this. And now that I'm on my own, you cannot force me anymore. I want to do this. I know that I can make something of myself. So, I am going to Iran, because what I've been doing here for the past 2-3 years, I can continue in Iran, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stay there. But I'll go there, find people who will continue at my footstep. We just guide them. So I just got on a plane, went to Iran, and that this is where one of my younger uncles, who spoke a fluent English, and he was, Isabel, my cousin that you met and you said you want to interview. And I approached him. I said, will you help me, because you speak English, and help us with this project? And he said, of course. So then we went back to all those companies that we had trained in America, but under the umbrella of another company, and offered them that, okay, now you can continue with your Farsi lessons here, and your wives, we can help your wives if they're unhappy and they're bored. We set trips to museums, to other cities around, to Hamadan, to this, to that, to the Caspian Sea. And anyway, we started Farsi classes and cultural orientation classes in Iran, actually. So then you could approach the companies here to say, okay, start here with us, and then continue in Iran. And I started, hiring teachers to teach English, and also, to manage the cultural orientation classes. And so we just got so busy doing that. So that really took off also like fire, And it was during one of these, then I would go back and forth to make sure everything was in order, and my uncle was supervising and seeing to it. And so on one of the trips that I was, this may be what we call qismat, this is, if something is meant to happen, it will happen.
Fate, some kind of a fate, yeah. I want to ask, before we go on, I'm interested, it is interesting to hear if when you build this cultural orientation content for American wives, or the people that are going to work in Iran, what you had in mind. I mean, what did you think was important for them to know about Iran, Iranian society, how you bridge, I mean, another culture to a new culture?
Yeah, I understand. Well, we started by the language, by teaching them Farsi, because we felt that that's very important. Because these ladies came to Iran, and of course they had the best lives, the best apartments, and they each had what we call the kolfat, a maid, and they would have to start somewhere. They had to get used to the idea of having a full-time maid in their house, how to communicate with that maid, how to respect her, how to ask her what to do, what not to do. And then we would actually take them out shopping to, for example, to the local grocery store, to the local, for example, what do they call them, Mr. Bloomingdale? Department store, how to buy, if you want to buy clothes, for example. Or so we would actually hold their hands and take them. This is what these ladies did. They would get 4 or 5 of them together with a car and a driver and take them. And we also would arrange museums for them. We would take them to museums so they would get familiarized with our history and with our with our culture, the culture. And then when the holidays came around, we would, for Nowruz, we would help them set a half-seen table, that sort of a thing. We would concentrate on that. And if they were Jewish, we would take them to the local synagogue and introduce them to the synagogue and to the people there. And so there was something for them to go to if they wanted to go on a high holiday or what have you, because there were the mixture of people, rushing to Iran. And so we try to address everything. We would try to address, history, language, history, the shopping, how to get around town, their religious needs, and we would take them to, we had these beautiful churches in Iran. We would take them and introduce them to the church so that if they wanted on a Sunday morning to go to church, they could tell the car and the driver, take me to this church or that church. And God knows we had them scattered, remember, all over Tehran. So this was the beauty of it, that we had everything there. And at the beginning, they would be shocked that, how come, you have churches here? Oh, yes, of course we have churches here. We also celebrate Papa Noel, I remember as a child, I could hardly wait for Christmas because Papa Noel would come and my mother would take me to the movies to see the films of Papa Noel with the reindeers going to the sky. And we had Christian friends. My parents had Christian friends. That first day of Christmas, they would invite us to their house and give us presents. So we were brought up with that idea. So I knew what Christmas was and giving presents was. Or we had the family who were Baha'is, and the Baha'is, the first day of Nowruz, we would wear our best clothes and go and visit them, because, so this is how we just introduced them, and also that Nowruz was a national holiday. It was not necessarily a Muslim holiday. Yeah, sure. There are still Iranian Jews here in America today who think that Nowruz is a religious holiday, whereas it's not. It's a national holiday. It's a Persian holiday, you know.
Yeah, sure.
We like to have the sabzi and the mahi and you know, the half scenes,
some
as
kind
we
of
say.
a celebration for the nature. Yeah, there's something.
Yeah, exactly. So we wouldn't stop at anything. We would teach them so that their heads would be busting with all this information. I said, oh my God, I didn't know. When they said, my husband said, we are going to Iran, we thought we are going to they had Saudi Arabia in front of their eyes with the oil coming out of the ground, and you know, and camels and stuff like that, because to them, they're going to the Middle East. Now you try and tell them that, okay, Iran is not necessarily the Middle East. It's further away. Middle East is different. So we tried very hard. That's why we were so successful. And then during one of these trips that I made to Tehran, I got into a car accident, and then I was actually the next day, 2 days later, I was coming back to New York, and so I went to the airport, and you know, got on an Iran Air flight, and while I say that because this is where the qismat comes, that when something is meant to happen, it will happen. And the plane was backing up, and it just sort of ran into the wing of another plane. So obviously the plane couldn't take off. And so they told, okay, everybody out, and now we are stranded in Tehran airport, and until we find other flights back to Europe, at least to one point, Paris, London, or whatever, and take a flight to New York. And so finally, after half a day, you know, they found a flight for me on a BBC, because I said, look, I have injuries, I have to, you know. So we got on the second plane, and then this one takes off, and I have no room for my foot. It's bothering me. I said to the guy, look, I can't sit like this until I get to London or to New York. You have to find me a place where I can, you know, have more comfort. He said, okay, there is some room in the back of the plane if you don't mind going there. I said, no, I don't, as long as I can stretch my leg, which was injured because of a car accident. So he takes me to the back, and then as I'm sitting, I take a book out, and it's in English, and I'm reading it. And then some guy standing, you know, in 2 rows down, he's walking back and forth, and he comes, stands on top of me and says, oh, you're reading an English book, you know, that, so you speak English? I said, yes, I do. Well, you know, I'm American. I'm also going back to New York. I said, okay, good, thank you. Then I started reading my book, but he just kept on asking questions. Do you live in Iran? Do you live in New York? I said, well, both at the moment. What do you do? Well, this is what I do. I teach Farsi and cultural orientation to American companies. Okay, so what do you do? He said, I'm a general in the US Air Force. But he wasn't wearing, you know, he was wearing, you know, casual clothes. And I said, oh, that's interesting. He said, no, but what you do is very interesting. I said, yeah, well, I should hope so. He said, you know what? So this is something that maybe we can use you for in Iran, because we have a lot of people that, you know, we have a lot of personnel who need to learn Farsi while they're working in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. So we never stopped talking until we got to New York, you know. And he got my card, and he said, I'll call you and to see if we can set up a meeting. My Iranian counterpart is coming, and we can talk and see. And so I said, okay. And then, to make the long story short, I met with him and the Iranian counterpart. And then they said that, you know, we've been talking at what we need more than that, more than teaching Farsi, we need to train bilingual secretaries, meaning secretaries who can also do both English and Farsi, you know. and because we have so many American personnel in Iran. And I said, well, we haven't done that. We only do languages, but I have to talk to my partners and see. To make the long story short, Miriam, this is what brought me to the Iranian Air Force. And we set up.
Let's show it a photograph, because we have a
Yes.
photograph of this period. Yeah.
So that's the period where we.
Oh, we missed this one.
No,
Okay.
this is my college years with some.
This is
Oh,
what, okay, we get back to them.
Okay, we get back to that one. That one was the nephew's bar mitzvah. So on one of those trips that I made to New York, yeah.
Okay.
So this one was, we eventually set up a school in Iran where I had to hire about 7 or 8 American teachers who would be able to teach secretarial skills like typing and shorthand and the English language, business English, and what have you. So this was a huge project. It took about a year to put it together and present it to the Iranian and American Air Force. And they finally approved it. And then they built a school for us, and I hired all these teachers, and we had to bring them to Iran, and I needed to get an apartment in Iran for everybody. And 4 of us lived in one apartment, and I lived with one group, and the other group lived together. So it was a huge project. We eventually put it together. And finally, it was supposed to be 4 6-month periods, and we would train about let's say 50 every 6 months. We would train 50 students, really hard every day and night. We would push them, and then we would give them a legitimate certificate that we got here from the Catherine Gibbs School, which was a famous secretarial school in New York. And we used their programs in order to teach the students in Iran. So
I just want to understand. So this is the project that was run by the U.S. Air Forces? This is
well, it was run by us, but we were doing it. It was my company, my teachers, our curriculum, and but the Iranian and American Air Force were our sponsors, because we would train secretaries to be working with the American personnel and their Iranian counterparts. So, these guys working together in Iran, they needed bilingual secretaries that if somebody gave them, okay, here's a letter, type it for me. It was in English, they could do it, or if they gave it to them in Farsi, they could type it also. So these were students that the Air Force had hired, or they were already secretaries in the Air Force, Iranian Air Force. So we selected them by giving them tests and feel that, okay, they can very quickly learn English and learn how to do English typing, and they do shorthand and all those necessary. And then I had also teachers to teach them hygiene, for example. That was very necessary. A lot of these girls, wore like, head covers. Even in those days, they were very religious, some of them. And so, okay, even though you wear a head cover, I'm not here to remove your head cover, but I'm going to teach you that every 2 days you have to wash your hair. In the old days in Iran, the girls would go to hammam once a week. That was not going to cut it. If they came to our school, the hygienic teacher would teach them, no, you have to bathe every day. You have to wash your hair every 2 days. you know, you have to do this, you have to do that, to be more presentable when they work with when they go to work with the Americans or with the Iranians. So we really had
70. Can you place us?
Yeah, this was around 70, 75, 76. That was the year. Yeah. Things were quiet in Iran in those days. Or maybe even, yeah, it was 76, 77 in those times. And so we trained the first 50, and the pictures that you saw were the first ones to have graduated from our school, and that's their graduation there, and they're getting their diplomas. As you see, the head of the American, he was a civilian. He gave a speech thanking us and what have you with the Iranians, and then the other one is that the students one by one would come and receive their certificates, which meant that they completed our school and they were ready to go and be hired and work in the next building other than our school. And then the second session would come, the second set of students would come for another 6 months. So we did 6 months of these trainings, and they all graduated with flying colors, and they were so happy.
Sorry, Fereshteh, the men here are all Iranian officers or?
Yes, the ones in uniform are Iranian officers, but the one in the civilian clothes is American. I don't even remember his name. It's not, yeah. So
okay.
It was very, very satisfying, because this was different from the Farsi language school that I still had going concurrent with this one. So that was different, and this was a different project. And this, of course, required that, I forgot to say this, one of their conditions was that I move to Iran and live there and be the head of the school and supervise the whole program. They wouldn't have it without me being there, because me and my partner, who was an American gentleman, we had put this all together, but he had a family here, so he could go back and forth. But I was a single woman, you know, and so I had to move to Iran. And you can imagine how that went with my family.
I want to ask something about it, but do you know what is very interesting for me is that between 63, when you and your family moved to the United States, and 74, 5, when you come back to Iran, I'm amazed by the transformation, being from a young girl, a young woman, coming to the United States without language, trying to immerse yourself into the society. And a few years after, you go back being the head of the school and helping, high officers and doing something.
I was helping the Iranian girls to make something of themselves also, you know, because all those people that I trained how to teach, for example, Farsi to the Americans, they had something to take away, you know, so they are still grateful to me. And then the ones that we trained, you know, they went on, you know, even after the revolution, they went on to become bilingual secretaries. It was easy for them to get jobs, at least, or just even in Farsi, you know, in Iranian companies, because they had the skills, you know. But this was, you know, I hate to say it, I love my family. After that, they became supportive, and, you know, they accepted that I was living in Iran. And at the time, also, my oldest brother and his family were also living in Iran. You know, he had moved to Iran. So he was there. At least I had my brother there to watch over me. Even though I had the family, our family was one of the well-known Jewish families, as you know, in Iran. So, but my parents, they accepted it. But I would make quick trips to New York to see them, but I had to be in Iran for the duration of this project because it was, a lot was counting on it. So, but it was also rebellion on my part, I must say. If I may say, as an Iranian woman, I became rebellious. I said, I'm going to do this. They didn't do, the 60s were shot to hell for me. Maybe the best years of my life, when my mother was dreaming of me getting married and having children, was dead to me. I was very unhappy. And then when it came to the 70s and I became a little bit, I opened my wings with the Berlitz school, and I realized I have the potential for one thing to lead to another. I can do this. I can do the Farsi lessons. I can help write the Farsi books, and I can, and then if that day, that accident at the Tehran airport with the airplanes hadn't happened, I never would have met the people who offered me the job at the Air Force, which was the biggest accomplishments, for me. And it was so satisfying. But needless to say that once we start the fourth and the final phase of our project, that's when all hell broke loose in Iran suddenly. And it started the beginning of the revolution and what people pouring into the streets, and the anti-American sentiments. And I had to be protective of my teachers. They were all women, and some of them had families here. And so one day we continued with the classes still. We had two drivers that would drive us safely, to the base, and then which was at the south part of Tehran, and then they would bring us back home. But still, I was afraid for them, because I thought if one day somebody stops the car and sees there 4 or 5 American women in that car, they're gonna, really raise the hell. And then, of course, one day all hell broke loose and everybody poured into the Air Force Base, and we were hiding under our chairs and tables, and bullets were flying over us. And
you were there when it happened? I mean, when
I was there, the girls were there, and we were all there, but everybody was very tough and strong, and I kept on calling out their names. Are you there? Oh, so-and-so, are you there? So-and-so. Yes, we're here, Fereshteh. Don't worry, we're okay. We're okay. Don't worry, we're okay. And so finally, I called the driver, and I said, which I trusted him completely. I said, I need you to take us out of here and take us home. You have to get us home. I don't care how you do it. Just if you have to drive into the base, drive in the back of the school building, and I send them out one by one, and just go as fast as you can. But this was actually the day that the Shah left Iran. That's when all hell broke loose. So I said, okay, so I know there are people in the street.
We're talking about Shah left Iran on January, I think, 79.
Same day, same day. Yeah. Same day, we had to get these girls out of the base. And
no, sorry, it was before. It was.
I'm not good with those dates. I've made a conscious decision to forget.
Yes, wow.
Yeah. But anyway, we did somehow get them out. I won't give you the detail. It was very, very difficult. We did get them out. And there was one teacher who was, as you can see in the pictures, she was African American, and then we were more worried about her because she shouted that I'm American, you know.
This is your colleagues. I mean,
Yeah, these are my girls. These are at the base, the one in the black and white. We were at the base celebrating. That's the day we celebrated Nowruz, actually, at the base. And then the one in the color is that we also used to party at home, and we would wear our fancy clothes and have parties, and I would have my friends over, and you know, we had to keep them happy, the teachers. They had no family there, but they made friends very fast. And but Mary, the one who is African American, and she also is wearing an African clothes, you know, she was excellent. She was an excellent teacher, so I couldn't resist not taking her to Iran with me. And she came with flying colors. And also, unfortunately, we lost her to cancer about 4 or 5 years ago. We were still in touch. So, but anyway, so these are my girls, and there were some.
This is the teachers you recruit, you and your partner in the.
Yes, we recruited them from New York, and they came from different parts. I mean, we put sort of, I think we put ads in the paper. I'm not really sure, or I contacted some business schools in New York, and they gave us names of people of those who were interested in making the move to Iran, you know. So they were really, they had some guts to say, yes, I will go to Iran, you know, as single women. And one of them actually hooked up with one of the Americans, and they got married when they got back here. And Mary, the African American, she was dating the ambassador to Senegal in Iran. So they all had their own little personal lives, but you know, I told them to take it easy, don't make any, you know, any waves. We still have to be proper with the Air Force, you know, we can't have any scandals. So they were, you know, they were okay. They were fabulous girls. And so eventually, you know, the American embassy, they evacuated all the Americans, so they had to leave. But they wouldn't. I swear to you, they would sit, they were hanging on to my clothes, and they said, no, Fereshteh, we're not going without you. If you're staying, we are staying. And if we go, you're going with us because you're here as an American also. Let's go. And I said, no, listen, I have to stay here. I'm responsible for this project. Plus, they still owe me a lot of money. Don't you want all your money back? So let me know. I'm not going, but I want to make sure that you are safe and sound in the American embassy, and they'll take you back home. And I'll be here. My brother is here. I have family still here, and I'll be okay. My uncle will watch over me, and the Air Force themselves, you know, they'll watch over me. They're not gonna, you know, step all over me. You know, we've worked so hard for them, you know. So I really, with tears and cries and what have you, I had to tell the two drivers, take them away, just force them into the cars. And he took them to the American embassy because it was just one day that all Americans could go to the American embassy, and they would just, you know, put them on planes. But I stayed. I stayed for another few months, and I would go back and forth to the base and talk to them, you know. And I said, look, we did finish 3 sessions, and my contract says that I have to get all my money to the end, and you know, this one we are half done. I feel bad for the girls, but they know enough to be able to still work for you guys, you know. But they wouldn't have it. They finally made a connection between me and some members of my family who were executed in Iran, as you know, and I have a picture. So, and once they made that connection, then yeah, once they made that connection, then it was not a good day for me. So they told me themselves that you better leave, because if they find you here at the Air Force and at the base, and they're going to put you somewhere that nobody is going to be able to find you. So you better go into hiding and go back to your parents.
They told you that from the Air Force, from Iranian, I mean, you were
Sorry?
told, you were...
Yes, I was told, but in just plain Farsi, that I should, the Americans had already left. So I was told not in so many words, that if you stay and you come back to the base, and if you come back asking for money, being that you're related to the so-and-so that was executed, nobody will ever find you. They're going to put you in the dungeons of the Air Force, of the base, and nobody can find you. Nobody is going to give you money now at this point by then, Khomeini had arrived in Iran and all hell had broken loose. And so I knew I don't stand a chance. So I went, I had to go into hiding, and I sort of emptied out my apartment and sold everything. And my brother was under house arrest because he had a very sensitive position also in the Jewish community and in my family that he worked for. So he was put under house arrest, and we didn't know what was going to happen to him. So I had to rescue myself, which meant that if I wanted my parents alive, I had to somehow give it up and go back to New York. And so I didn't know how.
Sorry, Fereshteh. We see here, in a way, your uncle, Habib Iranian, which was the head of the Jewish community.
Yes.
And this is really a very important part of the history of Iranian Jews in the revolution. So can you tell us?
Exactly. He was, sorry, just to make a little correction, he wasn't my uncle, he was my cousin. He was my Pesar Khale, if you have a Hebrew for it. Our mothers were sisters.
Yes, okay, sorry.
So we were first cousins, but apart from that, we were extremely close. He had 6 other brothers, but I happened to be and he was so interested in the work that I was doing in Iran. He was so nationalistic that he always used to encourage me. Fereshteh, do you know what this means, what you're doing for your country? Do you know what this means? This means so much that, you're doing. I admire you for doing this. Every week, we would make a point of calling me in the base at my office. How is everything going? Do you need anything? Can I do anything for you? And I would say, no, thank you. It's going well. Everything is fine. So he was, when my own family kept on telling me, oh, don't do this, don't do that, come back, go hide here, go hide there. He would encourage me on, that from the beginning. He was my biggest fan, my biggest supporter. From the days, the early 70s, when I started the Farsi classes, he said, this is something amazing you're doing, Here's a guy who had factories, he was an industrialist or what have you, but I was doing something to introduce the Iranian culture and the language to the, let's say, quote unquote, foreigners who were coming to Iran, and he found it very admirable, and he would spread the word. So every Friday when his family and us would gather to have lunch, the biggest, there would be 30 people around the table. He would always make a point of telling everybody, you know what Fereshteh is doing? Because all their own daughters, they were wonderful, but everybody was married with kids and this and that. And they had gone to the best schools in England and Switzerland. But for me, I didn't even finish college because I was angry at my brothers and my parents for not letting me do what I wanted to do or go to a school where I wanted. So, it was just,
Yeah,
but
you told me in a previous talk we had that your family saw you as some kind of a Wonder Woman for doing this project.
yes, my family in Iran did. They were watching me do this, and they would call me the Wonder Woman or the $6 million woman, and needless to say, there were no talk of millions in what I was doing, but it was in those days the program, the $6 million man, was a famous show on television. So my nickname was the $6 million woman, meaning that I was doing a big deal, So everybody was very, encouraging. But then when it all ended, everybody had left Iran, and I was really just alone. It was me and my brother, and they're under house arrest, and he was executed, and. So that was the day that I heard that happen. It was the most devastating of all bad things that happened to me, and it was really the end of the end for me, at least to stay in Iran. I had no reason to stay, but the question was how to get out.
Just to make for people who are going to watch this this interview, Habib Iranian was executed on April 1979 for the charges of cooperation with Zionist country or
exactly.
So you were in Iran when it happened?
Yes, of course. I was there. I was still there, and I was hiding in an apartment that a friend of ours had given me to stay. It was a little studio in a very high-rise building, and then there were other friends in the building, so I didn't feel alone. So then one morning, I know that early in the morning, it was like around 6 o'clock in the morning. It was the 1 year anniversary, your side of his wife, who had died a year before of a heart attack. So everybody, the whole family who was left in Iran, they were getting ready to go to the cemetery for your side, and we knew that he was in prison. His oldest son and daughter-in-law were under house arrest. My brother was under house arrest, but I was free, but I was in hiding, so none of us went. And so I knew that day everybody was going to the cemetery. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang, and I picked up, and it was a friend who lived in the building, and he said, can I come down and see you for a minute? I said, at 6 o'clock in the morning? He said, yes, I have to talk to you. I have to see you. So, he came down, and I opened the door, and he said, well, sit down. And I said, yeah, what is it? Tell me what's going on. Is it my parents? Is it my brother? But what's happened? He said, well, I have bad news for you. I said, what? He said, early this morning, they executed Habib al-Ghanian. I screamed. I said, what the hell are you talking about? He said, yes, last night in the middle of the night, they had a muhakeme, how do you say? They had a
sentence. He was.
yeah, they brought him out, and they had him in the court, and they declared a sentence with I gave him a piece of paper and a pen, and they said, okay, you can write whatever you want here to whoever you want, and that's it. And they sentenced him to be executed, and they took him and put him against the wall. And that letter finally made its way to my brother, who used to work for him anyway. So they handed it to him. So he had said that I'm not afraid, and I was a proud Iranian, and it was really a very touching letter. I did read it eventually. And so that day I was besides myself. So we didn't know what to do. And he had a very, very older sister who was bedridden. And she lived in Tehran. And so I decided to get up and go to her house. And so once I went there, then I realized the rest of the family, whoever is around, one by one, everybody's gathering there. And then suddenly Habib's son and daughter-in-law also came. And we said, oh my God, what happened to you? They let you go. He said, yes. At 6 o'clock, as soon as they executed him, they came open our house door, and they told us, get out. They didn't even let them take a toothbrush. They just kicked them out of the house. It was in the countryside. They took over the house, and they let them in the middle of nowhere for them to, I don't know, hitchhike themselves to Tehran. And they headed to their aunt's house, And so we'd all gathered there. We didn't know where to go. So everybody had thought of the same place. And, but after 2-3 hours, the Sepadaran, the Sepah Pastaran, the militias, they came to the house. They knew exactly where it was or who she was and what that house was. And they saw all of us gathered there and crying. And they said, break it up, spread out, spread out. Don't, you can't get together. No, there's no reason for you to mourn. There's no reason for you to cry. Just get out. So they dispersed all of us. They didn't even let us, stay together. So everybody ran out each way they could, because we were afraid that they would grab somebody and, not let them go. You just didn't know what to make of it, So it was after that I said, that's it, I can't stay. I only had one overnight bag with me. The rest of my stuff, I had a cousin there who helped me on my father's side. He had connections, so he had sent 2 suitcases, of my clothes and what have you. The furniture I had given away, and but I was with like a backpack going from one place to another, so they wouldn't find me. And then eventually I contacted some people who happened to like me, the Air Force people. I had helped out their children get acceptances, in colleges here, for example, or, they needed something from the US, clothes. Every time I would go, I bring them something. They actually, they helped me. I contacted one that I knew would be loyal to me. And he contacted his own little circle of friends. And they were taking a risk, but they took my passport. I had to take a chance, give them my passport, and hope that then I would tell them, okay, I have reserved my seat on such and such a plane, such and such a day. And they said, okay, so just go to the airport, go to the passport box, and your passport will be there, and then you can leave. And I wasn't sure. I mean, I went to the airport with my heart coming out of my throat, going to the passport window, and I gave them my name. And I said, okay, either somebody's going to grab me by the arm or they're going to hand me my passport.
You were by your own?
I was alone. I had nothing to check in. I just had a little bag with me. And so you know, I got my passport and I got on the plane. And, you know,
Wow.
and until I got to they announced that we passed the, you know, the borders and we are flying over Turkey. And that's when I went for the first time. For the first time, after all those months, I started crying. Because up to that point, I had been very tough and rough and being there for everybody, for my brother, for my, you know, for my friends, for the colleagues, for the teachers I had there, for, you know, whatever was left. And so it,
and I imagine that since then you were not in Iran, you didn't go back in any, I mean,
not since then. No, not since then. I never went back, but I mean, I miss it, but I know it's not the same Iran that I left, even as a child or at that point. Everything has changed. So I don't have that much pull, you know, to want to go, even though my husband has family there still. But I don't have anybody there. All my family has already left or they've passed away, the ones who were in Iran. And so when I came back, you know, of course, you know, my parents were besides themselves, you know, that I made it out, and so they forgot all about my
your rebellion,
not being married and having children.
And so we are going to see and now we are getting to the
you're going to see, but this is the funny story that I think I mentioned it to you, that there's my husband. I knew him and his family since I was 7 years old. I went to school with his cousins in Iran, and so I also knew him, but I hadn't heard or seen him, oh God, since all those years ago. And so when I came back to New York after 2 years or 3 years, my friend came to visit me. She was in Spain at the time. She came to visit me in New York and said, oh, you remember the cousin I had that we used to, you know, in Iran, da, 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 da. And I said, oh yeah, I remember them, the 3 brothers. I said, yeah, sure, I remember them, but I haven't seen them since then. So I said, oh, one of them, you know, is here and I want him to come here and see me. I said, okay, invite him. So at that point, my parents had allowed me to have my own apartment. So I had my own apartment here in New York. And I said, if I lived alone through a revolution in Iran, I can live in the middle of Manhattan by myself in an apartment. So anyway, so he came to visit his cousin, and so we met actually in my apartment here, but nothing came of it, of course, immediately. After my friend went back and we stayed in touch, you know, and I invited him to the Thanksgiving or the Persian New Year, the parties or whatever. So gradually we became very close, and since, you know, it was rooted in my head and my family that religion doesn't matter. We all happen to be Iranian, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever. So the question of religion didn't even enter into the equation. So when we decided to get married, and I went and I told my parents, they said, does he have his mother's, because his father had passed away, does he have his mother's, you know, permission? And I said, yes, I have already asked for it. So they gave me their blessings. And that was 36 years ago, Miriam. So we've been married 36 years. come this May. And unfortunately, we didn't have any children, but that didn't bother us. Our friends' children became our children, and now my niece's children are our grandchildren. So that picture is our wedding, and then the other one is like today, pre-COVID, when I had short hair. Now my hair has grown. So here we are. That's another, that it can work. It can work. That's my message to the Israelis, that it can work. And community.
And you and your husband, you talk in Farsi or in English? I mean, how do you communicate?
No, we talk mostly in Farsi. Sometimes, sometimes we may break into English, but we talk in Farsi most of the time, and also he's a frustrated French speaker, so sometimes we try to speak French.
Okay. And I'm asking this question because really, you live from 1963 in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Until now. Until 2020.
Yeah, I'm asking because how do you identify yourself? What is the part of Iran and Farsi in your everyday life?
No, it's all Iranian, Miriam. I have one or two American friends, if you can say that. Well, during my work, I know a lot of acquaintances from work, but I have never grown close to the American. Nothing against America or Americans. It's just that we are so far apart, mentally, emotionally, the way we live, the way we think, the way, I don't know, maybe I'm too much attached still to my childhood, to my parents, and, to family. I never really belonged. I know that maybe some Americans would be offended by this, but I hope not. Even when I became an American citizen, which, it would help to have an American passport after your Iranian passport was not really top of the world anymore. I remember the day that you go to swear in, you have to raise your hand and, swear that, to the American, this American. I had a hard time raising my hand. I just, it's not that I'm not loyal to America. I've lived more in America than I have in Iran. And it has offered me a lot of opportunities and whatever. But deep in my heart, and being married to an Iranian, someone that I know his family from way back when in Iran. So we both have these roots that they're really so deeply rooted that it's hard to Farsi, and I celebrate Nowruz, and and my Farsi is still good. I sometimes do some translation work. But the funny thing is that the Farsi today in Iran is so different than the ones because if you put a newspaper in front of me now that is printed in Iran today, half of the words I don't understand. They've changed so many of the words, and if it's just I don't identify with today's Iran anymore. But the old Iran is still in my blood. And looking at photographs, breaks my heart. but it also brings some joy. When I was looking at the photographs for you, there were so many. I said, oh God, which one should I choose? Which one should I choose? And but so it's still there. It doesn't leave you. It doesn't leave you. At least that's my feeling. I don't know. I don't know if all the people you have interviewed, I mean, I listened to one or two and they said that they still miss Iran and, they want to go back. And but I don't really want to go back. I want to remember it the way it was, the way it was and the way I left it. I never forget back in '63, the night that I left. It's just so, I was so traumatized that night, but we had to leave. I held a grudge against my father for the longest time. And so did my mother. But he was a good man. He meant well. He wanted to be with his son, the whole family together, and it's just as well because, if we didn't live in 1963, we would live in 78 where everybody else left. So we were already, deep rooted here and we were able to help a lot of the family and friends, who came from Iran and they needed help, settling down. So that was good.
Fereshteh, I want to say thank you very much
for Miriam,
telling us this amazing life story. I appreciate your time, your willingness to share this story, and in a way, I think I'm lucky to have this opportunity to listen to things, to your life, to the story of your life. It's very interesting.
I'm sure everybody has amazing stories to tell. Yeah.